In CIST 2611, Chapter 14, we'll look at best practices for network security management. So, in this chapter, we're going to identify firewall and network security management best practices. We're going to look at some key concepts, the best practices for network security management tools, preventing and deterring incidents, incident response, and also network security assessments, testing, and troubleshooting. First, we'll talk about the essentials of network security management. In network security management, you want to focus on core security services when designing security. So you design your network security around those core principles, such as the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the CIA triad, to ensure the protection of sensitive information, the data integrity, and uninterrupted access to those resources. You also want to consider designing security measures around deterrence, detection, and delay mechanisms. That's to discourage unauthorized access, promptly identify security breaches, and impede malicious activities. Now, some other common parameters for security design and implementation. You want to focus on prevention, detection, and response capabilities. And this is to proactively prevent security incidents, also to swiftly detect anomalies or intrusions, and also to effectively respond to security breaches when they do occur. Some other essentials of network security management include do not rely on a single or individual defenses. So, you want to implement a layered defense strategy that incorporates multiple security measures to provide redundancy and resilience against evolving threats. You also want to know the limitations of security products. So, you want to acknowledge that the limitations of security products and technologies, and also supplement them with a comprehensive security policies, practices, and user education initiatives. Also, assume insecurity of programs. So, operate under that assumption that all software programs are inherently insecure and prone to vulnerabilities. You also want to establish policies for rigorous code testing and vulnerability management. You also want to develop a policy for testing all codes. So, you develop and enforce a policy for testing all codes, and this includes applications, scripts, firmware, and you do this to identify and remediate security vulnerabilities before deployment. You also want to establish an effective patch management system to promptly deploy security patches and updates for the operating systems, applications, and firmwares to mitigate known vulnerabilities. You also want to implement security hardening measures on internal hosts to minimize attack surfaces, restrict unnecessary services, and enforce strong access controls. Another essential is to develop a comprehensive contingency plan for handling system failures, errors, security incidents, intrusions, and downtime to minimize disruptions and ensure the business continuity. Also, assume the possibility of becoming a victim of a denial of service attack and implement measures to mitigate that impact, such as network traffic filtering and redundancy. Also, do not rely on other layers of services to secure a particular service or protocol. You want to validate security measures at each layer of the network stack. Also, continuously evaluate and learn from security incidents, vulnerabilities, and mistakes to redefine your security policies, procedures, and defenses. You want to practice keep it simple in security. So you strive for the simplicity and security solutions and configurations to minimize the complexity and potential points of failure. You want to balance security measures with usability considerations to maintain the functionality and accessibility of network resources for authorized users. Prioritize security efforts based on risk assessments. Focus on addressing the most critical vulnerabilities and threats first. You also want to gain a comprehensive understanding of the organization's network topology, the assets, and the traffic patterns. And this is to effectively implement and manage your security controls. So you want to make sure that you know your network. Another essential for network security management is to perform thorough and regular assessments of the network infrastructure. Now, this is to identify and address any security flaws, vulnerabilities, and weaknesses in your network. You also want to be realistic. So, you set those realistic goals and expectations for the network security measures, considering the organization's resources, capabilities, and risk tolerance in those expectations. You want to create and refine procedures. So, you establish standardized procedures for security tasks, also incident responses and configuration management. And you want to continuously refine them based on lessons learned and the evolving threats. You want to implement the privilege of least privilege. So this is to restrict access rights and permissions to only those necessary for the users and systems to perform their jobs, perform their intended functions. Also, you want to implement a separations of duties to distribute security responsibilities among different individuals or teams. So this reduces the risk of insider threats and unauthorized access. Now, some network security management tools we'll talk about. The first one is to develop a comprehensive written security policy. This is going to outline the organization's security objectives, standards, procedures, and guidelines that are used to guide the security management efforts. You also want to utilize a security checklist, and this allows you to systematically assess and verify compliance with that security requirements, configuration settings, and the best practices across your network devices and systems. Another security management tool is to maintain a detailed inventory of all hardware and software assets that are deployed within the network. Now, this includes servers, routers, switches, firewalls, and applications. And you can complete this list and maintain this inventory list to facilitate effective security management and monitoring of those devices. You also want to do a physical cabling layout and device location map. So you document the physical cabling layout and the location of the network devices within the infrastructure. And this is to help aid in troubleshooting or maintenance or any physical security assessments. You want to create a logical organization map also that details networking addressing schemes, subnet allocations, and a logical grouping of network segments to facilitate efficient IP address management and network planning. You also want a complete configuration documentation for each device. So you maintain that comprehensive configuration for every network device. This includes your routers, your switches, your firewalls, servers, and that's to ensure an accurate and consistent configuration management. You also want to document all changes made to the network configurations, the policies, settings, include the date, the time, and the rationale for each change. And you do this to maintain accountability and also facilitate auditing and troubleshooting. You also want to establish backup and restoration procedures for critical network devices, the configurations and data. And this is to minimize the impact of system failures, data loss, and security incidents. You also want to develop and maintain a comprehensive incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery strategy to mitigate the impact of your security incidents that'll happen. This to ensure operational resilience and also to help with a timely recovery. Another management tool will be to establish troubleshooting guidelines and procedures. This is used to systematically diagnose and resolve network security issues. You want to maintain up-to-date documentation for all your hardware and software components that are deployed within your network. In this documentation, you want to include the specifications, configurations, any maintenance records. You want to invest in ongoing training and development to enhance the knowledge, skills, and expertise of your network security personnel. And also, you want to leverage online resources, forums, communities. You do this to access up to date information, best practices, and also for peer support for your network security management and troubleshooting. Now, the foundation for any security endeavor is a written plan that's outlining the organization's security objectives, strategies, and implementation details. This is your security policy, your security plan and security policy. So, the written security policy establishes a documentation trail for security practices with standards within the organization. It is something that must be regularly reviewed and updated to reflect changes in technologies, threats, and organizational requirements. A security checklist is used to verify and validate every countermeasure, safeguard, safety control, a deterrent, prevention, and defense that is implemented by the organization. This should include every security control deployed for faculty control, network security, data protection, access management, and more. So, limiting network access and implementing encryption, you want to limit and filter internet connectivity. So, restrict access to the internet by implementing these filtering measures to block unauthorized or potentially harmful websites and services. You strengthen authentication mechanisms by requiring multiple forms of validation, verification, such as passwords, biometrics, smart cards, and tokens. And you do this to enhance security with the multi factor authentication. Also, do not rely solely on the session's initiation authentication. Um, so, you want to extend the authentication beyond the session initiation to include periodic reauthorization or continuous monitoring to mitigate those unauthorized access. You also want to reduce the attack surface by minimizing remote access capabilities, limit it only to essential personnel or tasks, and implement secure remote access solutions. You also need to a default adopt a default deny approach for your network access. Now, in the default deny, all traffic is blocked by default, and only authorized traffic is permitted based on predefined rules. You protect sensitive data stored on your devices by encrypting the device's storage and individual files to prevent unauthorized access in case of theft or loss. Another way you can limit network access and implement encryption is to secure your data in transit by encrypting network traffic using strong encryption protocols, such as SSL/TLS for your web traffic or IPsec for VPN connections. You also want to implement whitelist application controls, which allows only authorized applications to run on the network. This whitelisting means that only those pre-approved applications to execute are allowed to execute while it blocks everything else. Now, physical security, this involves preventing unauthorized physical access, contact, or influence to sensitive components of the IT infrastructure. So, some key elements for physical security is you want to establish facilities that resist forcible entry and unauthorized access, implement physical barriers and controls to prevent outsider access, visitor management is a big thing to consider with physical security. So, you want to enforce escort policies for your visitors, consultants, and other authorized non-employees. With this, you want to also require that visitors be accompanied by authorized personnel at all times. Securing equipment is another key component of physical security. You want to make sure that your servers are locked and important devices they're stored in secured areas. This is done to prevent tampering and accidents or theft. Now, a couple ways you can do this is you can utilize cabinets, cages, or rooms with restricted access for those critical infrastructure components. You also want to implement some type of access control system. Now, this could be card key entry systems that can regulate access to sensitive areas. You can install alarms, motion detectors, security cameras to monitor and detect unauthorized access attempts. Now, the benefits of adding components for physical security include that it enhances the overall security posture of your organization. You're also safeguarding sensitive data, equipment, and resources from physical theft. And it also mitigates the risk of unauthorized access, tampering, or that theft. Now, there are some techniques for preventing and deterring incidents we will talk about. Compartmentalization is a technique in infrastructure design that considers the likelihood of a security breach by malicious code or intruders. So, this involves segmenting the network into isolated compartments to contain and limit the impact of those security incidents. A honeypot is a decoy system or network that's designed to appear as a valuable target to the attackers. So it lures the attackers away from your critical systems and gathers information about their tactics, techniques, and procedures. A honey net is a network of honey pots. A padded cell, this is a security mechanism that waits for the IDS to detect an attacker. Once detected, the attacker is redirected to a controlled environment, which is the padded cell, where they can be isolated and prevented from causing harm to the production environment. You want to make sure that your antivirus scanner engine is regularly updated. It should be no more than a year old. So you update the definition database at least once per day to detect the latest threats. You want to configure the antivirus scanner to perform a complete system-wide low-level scans across all memory and storage devices daily or at least once per week. A software host firewall, you will implement this on individual devices to monitor and control incoming and outgoing network traffic. And you'll configure that firewall to block unauthorized access and prevent malicious activities. Whole drive encryption. You encrypt the entire hard drive to protect data from unauthorized access in the case of theft or loss. With this, you want to make sure that you use a robust encryption algorithm. That's to ensure the data confidentiality. You also want to establish a comprehensive backup recovery strategy to help mitigate the impact of data loss or system crashes, system failures. You want to store your backups offline, offsite to ensure redundancy and availability. You may want to consider using online or cloud storage for the backup. This is for secure and scalable backup solutions. Um, Now, user training, security awareness, and ongoing educations are an important part of an organization's security strategy. The primary goal of security related training is to modify the user's behavior. So, by providing education and guidance, organizations then can aim to improve user compliance with security standards, policies, and procedures and guidelines. Now, the benefits of good user training that it enhances overall security postures by fostering a culture of security consensus consciousness. Excuse me. Another benefit is it empowers employees to recognize and respond to those security threats, and it helps reduce the likelihood of those security incidents. Now, top executives must be held accountable to the same principles that are enforced throughout the general employee population. That leadership commitment to security that underscores the importance of security awareness and encourage the culture of security from the top down. Now, some key points to consider about user training is that user training is not a one-time event. This is something that's an ongoing process that requires continuous refinement and education. These programs should also be tailored to the specific needs and risk of the organization. Now, one of the things that you want to use for user training is you want to incorporate real world examples and scenarios to make the training relevant and engaging to the employees. So now we'll talk about fail secure, fail open, and fail close options. The fail secure refers to a condition where little or no harm, or at least no further harm, is likely to occur during a failure event. Now, depending on the situation, a fail secure state could manifest as either a fail open or fail close. A fail open involves reverting the state to being open, available, or unlocked in the event of a failure. So, the example of this is a fail open doors. Fail open doors allow people to exit easily during emergencies, ensuring that they are safe. Um, Fail closed refers to reverting to a state of being closed, unavailable, or locked during a failure event. So the example in this is to prevent a doorway or container from being opened during an emergency or compromise. All right, a security assessment involves judging, testing, and evaluating a deployed security solution to identify its strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. The configuration scan probes the system to determine if its current configurations and settings. What this does, it assesses which vendor patches are installed or missing and helps to identify any potential security gaps or vulnerabilities. Now, another network security assessment and testing is a vulnerability scan. This focuses on locating known exploitable weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the deployed scan systems. So, by identifying these vulnerabilities, the organizations can take proactive measures to remediate issues and strengthen their security posture. A penetration test is also called pen test. Um, this is also known as ethical hacking. This involves the application of hacking techniques, methodologies, and tools by trusted ethical security experts. Now, the goal of penetration testing is to simulate real world attacks to identify the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in a system or network security defenses. A post mortem assessment review. This is a self evaluation performed by individuals and organizations after each security uh, assessment task. It involves analyzing the findings, the lessons learned, and areas for improvement. And this is to enhance future security efforts. Now, change management is a process that manages the changes to systems or network configurations. It ensures that changes are implemented in a controlled manner. And it considers potential impacts on other systems and processes. So each change should be approved by a change control board that is used to maintain oversight and accountability. Compliance auditing, this involves assessing how well an organization is meeting the goals and requirements. These goals and requirements can be internal policies, they may be regulations set by the government, industry, or other regulatory agencies. With compliance auditing, the auditors examine an organization's operations through various methods. This includes documentation analysis, interview with personnel, and review of audit logs. Some other network troubleshooting, network security troubleshooting we're going to talk about is the recovery from countermeasure problems. So your network security troubleshooting aims to recover from issues related to security countermeasures. This involves identifying and resolving problems with security measures such as your firewalls, IDSs, and encryption protocols. Troubleshooting also often involves triage, which is determining the issues or problems of area of most immediate concern. So by prioritizing troubleshooting efforts, this helps address critical security issues promptly and effectively. You also want to install patches and updates in an effective preventive technique. This has helped to mitigate any security vulnerabilities and prevent exploits. So you'll make sure you regularly update systems and software. This helps maintain a secure and resilient network environment. Now, serious concerns arise when configuration errors are not easily fixed. This is because they can introduce vulnerabilities and weaken your security defenses. So, troubleshooting efforts may focus on identifying and resolving configuration errors. This is done to enhance network security. And troubleshooting also focuses on determining whether an intruder can bypass security defenses or restrictions. So, by detecting and mitigating bypass techniques, this is important for maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of your network resources. So, in this chapter, we've talked about the best practices for network security management. So, implementing those best practices for network security management. This involves focusing on core security services, understanding your infrastructure, and designing security around deterrence, detection, and response. We've also talked about how network security management tools include written security policies, the security checklists, configuration documentation, backup procedures, and incident response plans. Another topic covered in this chapter was preventing and deterring incidents and how it requires limiting network access, implementing encryption, employing physical security measures, and utilizing techniques such as honeypots and honey nets. We've also talked about incident response. This involves preparing for, detecting, containing, eradicating, and recovering from, and following up on security incidents to minimize their impact on your organization. Finally, we talked about network security assessments, testing, and troubleshooting, and how these are essential for evaluating security posture, identifying any vulnerabilities, and addressing security issues proactively.